Hey, everybody, and welcome to Season 2 of the PayCLT Payments Hub podcast, sponsored by Endava. I'm your host, Scott Harkey, and this season we're going to be diving deeper into the lives of some of the local payment professionals here in Charlotte to learn about their journey into the payment space. We hope you'll join us. Hey, everybody, we're really excited today because we have Kelly Buchanan joining us. Hey, Kelly, how are you doing?
Good. How are you doing today?
Doing great. It is a nice, warm spring-ish. I don't know if it's technically spring yet. Spring feeling day here in Charlotte. So excited for that and the good weather coming this way. Really excited to talk to you today. And I'm excited about this season of the PayCLT podcast in general, because we're really focusing on getting to know individuals. So in the past, we focused a little more on payment topics, talking about different things that were happening in the payment space. And we thought it'd be really cool to actually get to know the payments community that's here in Charlotte and dive deeper into that. And so you're one of our early guests in this new journey. So, you have to bear with us as we kind of figure this out. But I think, really excited today to dive into some questions to hopefully learn a little bit about you and how you kind of got started on your payments journey.
I am game.
Awesome. What better place to start than asking you to just give us a little bit of overview of kind of you and what it is that you do in your job today?
Sure. So today I'm the Divisional CIO of Enterprise Payments and Wholesale Technology at Truist. And that is a lot to say, but really what it means is, enterprise payments is all of the money movement, right? So all the different rails, RTP, wires, ACH, all of that good stuff, but then also focus on the applications that support our wholesale or commercial clients. So treasury solutions, our commercial digital footprint, as well as things like our corporate investment banking, wealth, and commercial lending technology.
Awesome. So quite a large remit there. Lots to keep up with, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about just how you manage all that in a little bit. But why don't we start kind of at the beginning of your payments journey? I know you've got I started to say a long career, and then I felt like, well, that might actually imply time frames, right? So I'll just say, a illustrious career with lots of experience. But what was your first payments job? What was your first job in the payments industry? How did you land it? Give us a little bit of how you got started in this space specifically.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I kind of happened into payments. So at the time after college, I was actually working in Overland Park, Kansas City, Missouri, and working at Sprint. I had graduated with a computer information systems degree, and I really didn't I wanted to come back home. I was from St. Louis, born and raised, and I wanted to do that. And I knew someone who worked at MasterCard that was their tech hub at the time. And they introduced me, and I pretty much got a job as an associate software engineer, which is, at the time, I think that was a rung above an intern. And I started in their networking area. So it was really kind of the core systems, the core authorization processing systems. I think it's really cool. So I worked at MasterCard for 20 years. And everyone was like, well, that's a really long time. It is, but, it was a really interesting journey at MasterCard because I started when they were privately held, which will also date me. And so, we really saw the company go from privately held to, a public offering to really a technology company. And, now anything is a technology company. You can't run a company without technology, but back then it was like this big thing that now we're a technology company. And who we were then serving, we used to call them member banks, but then it was, we have to think about the merchants, we have to think about small businesses and these consumers, and then we really got onto the acquisition journey at MasterCard, where there was, we realized that just doing authorization processing wasn't going to be enough to stay relative. So really we started looking at value, we called it back then value-added services in the loyalty space and, the digitization space and whatnot. And I started getting in the middle of that as well. So I was doing some due diligences on some of those companies. And then when it was time to actually go integrate those companies, when we actually acquired them, I started doing that M&A technical integration. So I was able to, I moved to Sydney, Australia for about a year and a half and did that for a company there. And then eventually ended my career at MasterCard in London. I had went over there when MasterCard moved into the account-to-account space and the RTP space. They bought a company called Vocalink, which actually runs, the software for the clearinghouses, RTP, and also a company called Nets, which was running the RTP network for Norway and Denmark. So it was really cool of an experience to watch. There was always a new challenge to watch kind of how they develop in the payment space.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And as you know, we've got some overlap there in that at Endava, where I work, VocalLink / now MasterCard is one of our largest customers and has been for the last 15 years, way back to the early days of VocalLink. And it is always funny when we talk about what we do, because I mentioned VocalLink, and most people here in the U.S. don't know who they are, right? And then you say, well,
Yes.
actually, they're the ones that built and operate the RTP network, and it's like, oh wow, really? I didn't know that. So certainly, some of those kind of companies that are maybe less known but have played a key role, and obviously now in Mastercard. The other thing that you said that was really interesting to me, the coding aspect. Now, I'm sure, given your background, you've been asked this a number of times. But do you still code? Can you write any code these days?
I help my daughter with her Python homework sometimes, but but no, I don't code anymore. But I do love technology, and I love being in technology and in that space, and kind of when I went to college, I didn't go thinking I was going to be in technology, and I ended up getting a minor in technology because I thought it was going to make me, more marketable, and I just loved it. I loved watching, what it could solve, and so I just have a lot of respect for it.
That's awesome. That's
I don't think
awesome.
they would let me code anymore. Like, I think that if I tried, they'd be like, "Please step away."
Well, that's where AI is going to help us, right? That's the
That
story.
is that is true. I can code if I get some of the AI platforms on my laptop.
Exactly. All right. Well, what about the Charlotte side of things, right? I believe you moved here with Truist. What were your first impressions of Charlotte when you moved here?
I was really excited to move to Charlotte. We had been in London for 5 years, and I chose to come to Charlotte over some other locations because I thought, I grew up, like I said, in the Midwest. I've got two smaller children, and being in a place where I thought was, one, really thriving in the payments and financial industry, but also just a really great kind of lifestyle of the weather and being out and about and so on. I will tell you a funny story. My daughter, she pretty much grew up in London, and when we moved here, we went to a concert, like our first weekend here, and we were walking around, and people are very, very friendly here. And so, like, everyone's like, "Oh, how are you doing? I like your outfit, this and that." And she finally looked at me and she's like, "Why are these people speaking to me? Don't they know about stranger danger?" Because in bigger cities, like London's not rude like other cities, but there's so many people, you just don't talk to them. And it was interesting to watch kind of them kind of move into this, I call it, Southern charm that we have here.
Yeah, it's very true. So I've lived here most of my life, and I've kind of just gotten used to it. But I've noticed when I go places and I interact, I'm waving at people as they walk by, and I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you so weird? I don't know. That's just the way I was raised. Is you're friendly and you'd be nice to strangers. But
I tell you, I still don't understand all of the, I didn't grow up in a college sports area either. So the all of the frenzy around the basketball and the different college rivalries, I have not embraced just yet.
Yeah, that is a thing, especially this time of year. I lived in the Raleigh Durham area for a while, and it's even more so there because so many of the universities, the sport in the college basketball, et cetera, are there. Yeah, it's a thing. I'm surprised you haven't gotten sucked in yet, but it's definitely one of those things. Um, I think I wanted to dive a little bit into just your career journey, because I think it's interesting for people to hear kind of maybe some of the pivotal moments, or just almost like what are the foundational steps that built you to your career to where you are today. Are there any particular ones that stand out as just a really big transition, or a really big set of responsibility, or a new role that you took on that you feel like really shaped your success and your kind of career path?
I do. I think there's kind of two. One is kind of more of the series. of them where, I always say you work in a big company and there are some pros and cons of working at a big company versus a fintech, right? And one of the pros of working at a larger company is you really can move around quite a bit within the same organization. And I really took advantage of that at MasterCard. Like every 2 to 3 years, it was like I'd learn something in a space and just kind of be like, okay, now what? Right. And I think it's really important in the payments area because I always like to say, payments crosses every system at a financial organization or no matter where you are, right? If you don't understand the digital front end, like if our online banking is down, payments is down. If you don't understand, the back end and deposits, if deposits are down, payments are down, right? So it really was about kind of moving around to all the different areas and really understanding all the different nuances of that, which I think really, really did help me. I think the other one is, again, payments. I really like critical systems that matter, right? So I've always enjoyed payments because of that, because you can really see how you're impacting people's lives every day. I used to always say, like, if you don't like it's a special place for people in technology, right? Because when you mess up, it is a big issue. And you don't have that on some of the other, I was like, if you want to go work on the websites, go work on the websites. Nobody cares if Mastercard.com goes down, right? But this is for tough people. And I think that was the other thing of just, the first big release I had that went really bad. Right, we were actually doing a credit card conversion, and it just went really bad. And we ended up having to go out to a lot of our large banks and, explain what went wrong, apologize, build that credibility back up, both externally but also internally, and also understanding then like how it impacted their businesses. And it really taught me a lot. One of just what it means to have operational rigor, what it means to, if it doesn't scale, it doesn't matter, which is what I like to say a lot in the payment space. But also being able to understand that that's the job. It was really hard for me that one year when like everything seemed to be going wrong and you take it upon yourself, but then you realize, especially in larger management, like that's just our job. I always say no one calls me to go, hey, thanks for keeping payments up today. They call me when their card doesn't work or things are down. And so being able to understand that's the job and drive teams over those humps and those fires is really something I learned. And now I like it.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think especially in financial institutions, right? Like working in payments is like that in general, I think, because as you said, the criticality of you mess with someone's money, and that's where real real emotion comes in, right? It has real impact on people. It can having lack of or not having availability to move money or to get a deposit or whatever can mean someone can't go buy groceries or they can't pay rent or these real life impacting things. Um, but I think especially in financial institutions where my view of financial institutions, the job of the institution is to protect the kind of the people's money in the financial system more broadly, right? And so it feels like it takes on an extra level of criticality there of it's not only payments, but it's payments in a financial institution whose responsibility is to make sure that it does work. And so it's like a heightened level of that responsibility.
It really is. And, it's a different, also when you think about it from, the different types of rails there are as well, right? So RTP and Zelle, like that's immediate. The customer expectation on that is it should work. And if it doesn't work, you're not getting access to your money. And that's a real problem for between us and the clients. You think about ACH and wires, which, if I'm having a hiccup at wires or ACH in the morning, I'm kind of okay. Once it starts getting later in the day, I get real nervous because, look, that's the difference of people getting their paychecks. If I don't get payroll out on an ACH payroll out by Friday, like they're going to go without the weekend with their paycheck, and that's a lot of responsibility to our clients and the businesses that we help.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things that I think is really interesting about your career is that you spent time in Australia and in the UK, and I know from my experience that's given a much broader view of all kinds of things. But how has that impacted your experience and how you think about the ecosystem?
It was really interesting. So when guess I was still younger in my career when I moved to Australia. And I had first time I'd really been out of the country like that. And I think it's funny because I worked for a credit card company and I had a credit card and I went there and we didn't have chip and they were all chip and pin. And even though they could take it, they wouldn't. Like if they found out that like if you did it really quick, it would be fine and they would get mad that you had to sign it. But if they saw you start to do it, they'd be like, we don't take that. And then I'd argue with them and be like, yes, you do. You do. You have to take it.
You have to, exactly. Yeah, I've had that argument more than once. It doesn't usually go very well with a merchant, but
It doesn't. It doesn't. And so it was really interesting. And then moving to the UK, where it's very real time payments, account to account focused, right? Where someone would say like, you know, if I was going to pay something for the kid's school and they asked me what my account number was, and I was like, what? Why are we doing? What are we doing? Or I was used to Cash App, and they didn't really have that. So it really has broadened. One, thinking about the difference, there's the difference in client expectations or client preferences, right? Wherever you go, and some like we're going to be hard pressed to get away from some of the credit card stuff in the states because people love loyalty points, where you don't really have that in some of the other countries. So there's some parts of that, but then there's the other piece of it is, just the difference between how complex the United States kind of payment systems are versus like in Australia or UK, which one, they're smaller, they have the one central bank, and they can regulate things and mandate things and really move the dial so much quicker. Right. And I think that's interesting. And I think it's, even in the States, so there's so many people, even people that work in payments, honestly, that don't understand that this is already happening everywhere else across the world. And we can learn so much from them.
yeah, I definitely agree. What about from a consumer standpoint or an end customer standpoint? Have you picked up on any cultural differences when it comes to payments, ways they think about the role that payment plays in their lives, or how they like to leverage them, or anything like that?
Like I said, I think that it is interesting how much more, and maybe it's just like the smaller, but like if you think about it in, when we were working in Norway or Denmark, like they knew kind of they knew their providers, right? The battalion service in Denmark, where, they run the bill pay, like they know the names of them. They're much more closer to all of that and understanding kind of how their money's being used. And, I think that's really interesting, and I think, like I said, some of the ways that if you think of India, which is like almost completely cashless, right? And not even a lot of that with being in the unbanked. So I think it's just really interesting. Some of it is preference, but some of it is also the rate at which that the clients are able to adopt things and what they're exposed to, right? I think that everyone always asks me, when are checks going away? And my answer is always not in my lifetime. And some of that has to do with preference, but also kind of the technical systems that we have and how hard it is to kind of move off of them.
Yeah, one of the more interesting things that I saw from a cultural perspective was specifically with some of the Asian countries where super wallets or the wallets are a much bigger part of the customer journey, right? And that they
Mm-hmm.
don't just have a wallet, but they have everything loaded in the wallet, right? The Alipay's, et cetera, WeChat Pays, et cetera. And so like I said, I grew up here in Charlotte and went to UNC Charlotte for undergraduate. And there's a study that UNC Charlotte did looking at that cultural element on payment preferences. And what they found was that in cultures that are, we'll say, heavily influenced by the government with a very kind of authoritarian view, that people typically want less choice, right, in their personal lives and decisions. So they're kind of trained culturally to, there is an answer to this thing and there's one answer to this thing, whether it's the milk that you buy or it's the payment service that you use or it's the grocery store that you go to. Optionality and capitalism is not a thing, right? Or
Right.
is much prevalent versus in kind of Western cultures where everyone wants to choose everything, right? Like the theory is that we would never have a super app here in the US because as an end user, no one will ever use just one app for everything. They actually want an app that they feel is special for this thing or that thing or that thing. But it was just really interesting because when you go to those countries, you see it, right? You see the usage of those apps across everything. And then I'm sure you as well as I have seen plenty of companies try to do well, let's build a super app here in
Yeah.
the US, or let's try to load all this stuff in there, including some of the banks. When I was at Bank of America, we had a plan at one point to load a whole bunch of stuff into our mobile banking app, everything from tap to pay to coupons and offers and all these different things we were going to put in there, but found that consumers didn't want that. They actually wanted an app for this or an app for that. So I think things like that are really interesting to see as well.
It's also really interesting these days to think about it in the even the generational. Like, what do we have, like 7 different generations now that are kind of in the workforce or are across us, right? And it's interesting to see their preferences and how they've changed and how it's changing kind of what we're doing. I mean, we've got a more mature client base that still wants to go to the branch and they want to see someone, right? And then you've got kind of some of the more digital savvies. I don't know, my daughter, I have a 12-year-old daughter who is the same, where it's like also, all the different apps that they have and that they want to switch between. And you go out to dinner with someone now and it's like half of them take Venmo, half of them take Zelle, someone's using Cash App. Like it can get a lot. I have a new rule. I don't download any more apps to pay someone.
Surely it's like, come on, you can use one of the 3 I already have, right? Like between Cash App, Venmo, and Zelle, surely we can make it work.
Right.
Um, so one of the I guess if we look a little bit at the payment space more broadly, one of the areas I wanted to ask you about was just payment trends, right? Like what do you think is one of the most underrated or overlooked trend in payments right now? What doesn't get enough airtime or attention, but you feel like is really important?
So funny. I'm a payment nerd, so I listen to so much stuff. It's hard for me to like. I'm like they all do, right? Like name it: AI, RTP, embedded finance, right? I don't think that. So from my standpoint, I think I don't know that RTP, real time payments, is underhyped, but I think it's the value that it can bring is underappreciated. How about that? I think that there's so much value that it's going to bring to clients, but also on the unbanked, right? And what it can do for some of the small businesses that haven't joined the more of the digital economy. If you think about folks that don't have bank accounts, like I used to work at Mastercard and they did so much in financial inclusion, and financial inclusion was mostly aimed at underdeveloped countries, right, where we have so much of the U.S. that is unbanked, or people in the gig economy that RTP can really help. So, and I don't think that we have, now that we've got, you've got FedNow coming out, you've got, RTP with the clearinghouse. And I think you'll get more and more of that, but I still don't think that we've been really clear as financial institutions or payment products folks or what have you to really drive out the key business cases that we should be going after. I feel like it's a little bit build it, they will come, and a little bit haphazardly, as opposed to really saying like, this is the value that we can create for these different user bases and really start figuring out how we drive that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I am involved in a bunch of the different communities around real-time payments, including the Faster Payments Council, where that's a frequent topic of conversation, right? What we're trying to educate people on, what are the use cases where real-time payments provide value? What are the ways that banks can create those use cases to justify the expense in building out, the capability? What are the ways we can help enable third parties to come up with these cases? I feel like one of the challenges is just, I mean, it's inherent in payments, but it's just the number of entities involved in the movement of money that have to kind of all be on board, right?
Yes.
So it's like you can build a consumer value proposition, and a bank can enable that, but then you've got to worry about, well, does the receiving party of that also have it enabled? And then there's
Right.
that complexity, right? Or if you go the commercial or the corporate side, the treasury side, well, then it's, does the ERP enable that? And then if you go downstream from that, does the cash management platform enable it? Like, so all these entities have to kind of have believed in the use case and enabled it. And I think that's part of what makes it really challenged, where there's not such a compelling use case where it's just like, oh man, if we did this, we could make millions and billions of dollars, and so we're all going to go do it. it's lots of I feel like it's lots of little incremental use cases which clearly add value, but that, it's almost like they have to get the inertia and the momentum behind them, and then the ecosystem build out to actually enable them.
You're right. And, it's interesting, even like I would love it when we get to a place where we just talk about payments and how the payment needs to be facilitated, right? Do you need the payment right now, or can you wait? How much do you want the payment to cost, and so on? Because everyone's like, I would, it'd be great. We talk about it here of like, we talked sometimes, I don't know if it's a buzzword anymore. I feel like I say some of these and people are like, no one says that anymore. I'm like, whatever. But intelligent routing or smart orchestration or whatnot, where if we're having an issue with the Fed or are closing our ACH or our wires on a Friday, can I just flip that over to RTP, especially now that they've increased their limits, and still get people paid? Like, do we being more understanding kind of how should the end goal of getting people their money, as opposed to being so rail specific of how that needs to go, and then putting the onus on all of those people in that chain to kind of make that decision for us.
Yeah, what I find really interesting about that is you're right. Like, it's almost cliche to talk about like intelligent routing because people talk about it so much, but at the same time, it still doesn't exist.
Doesn't
So it's like,
exist.
why can we all think that this is like the natural thing we should get to and believe in the value of it, but yet no one's built it yet? It's not a technical problem, right? It's easy to build with today's technology, but
there's 5,000 payment hubs. Like, I can't get through my email in one day without someone pitching me a new payment hub.
Yeah. So it is, like I said, I love the topic for that reason of where all the payment nerds are like, yeah, absolutely. Like, this is, let's talk about just, we want to get money from A to B, and what are your criteria, right? Is it speed? Is it cost? But yet it still doesn't exist though.
I think it still goes back to, I think that liability and whatnot of like, I'm then changing some, like, if you're not as a client telling me exactly what to do with it, am I changing it on the back end? And, do we all understand kind of that? I always think about it, especially from my MasterCard days, of like, who's liable here, right? Is it the merchant? Is it us? Is it the acquirer? Like, where are all these liability shifts happening when you're making some of these decisions on behalf of clients? But
true.
then otherwise, I have to then educate clients, though, to be able to make that decision. And I mean, we're payment nerds, and it's confusing for us.
Yeah. Well, now that you say that, I guess the other dimension is the regulatory aspect of it, right? Of like what regs apply depending on what rail it took. And if you made that decision, did you get the right disclosures up front, or were you assuming
Exactly.
it was going to be like that? That's the kind of stuff that complicates it.
Gets us into trouble.
Yeah. All right. So if you could change one thing about the payments industry, what would it be?
It would be kind of a little bit what we talked about, is that just lack of interoperability and the complexity, right? I mean, it's inherently complex. It's been around for a really long time. And then we've started building, one thing I like is over time, especially when I was maybe like you think 10, 15 years ago, right? A MasterCard and a PayPal they were competitors. Now we're realizing in the fintech space, right, is like we're partners and we need each other to do things. But then we've just kind of taken some of the legacy systems and then plopped more and more, fintechs or simplification systems on top of it, almost making it even more complex. And the interoperability, I mean, if you think about our two, FedNow and RTP, like they don't work together, right? And it just makes it a lot more complicated. So I would like to see more operability and simplification. But
That's a solid request. I think we all could benefit from that.
yes.
All right. So last one about this kind of part of the conversation, then we're going to jump into some local questions, but kind of a big picture question about you. And that's, if you weren't in payments, what career would you be in? Do you have a side career or a thing you've always wanted to do or felt like you would do if you ever changed career paths?
I mean, I've always wanted to be an heiress. That didn't have to work.
Okay.
But
I was trying to process that. I'm like, is that like an aerial stunts? Like,
no, it's just independently wealthy.
yeah, got it.
No, I would say a lawyer. I think I would be a lawyer. I love everything crime and crime shows. Maybe a forensic scientist on that side. Like, I like that aspect of it, but I I think that I like complex things. I like being able to look across things and figuring out like how do you put this together. A lot of the things that I do. When you ask me if I code anymore, not so much. But what I always say, what I bring to the table is being able to sit with our business partners and understanding what do they need, what are they looking for, and then getting the right technology solutions behind it to go like let's do it like this, and how do we execute against that end to end. And I think like when you can, I guess I can see that when I watch. I'm a Law and Order junkie, right? I don't even know if they're still making them. I think I've like watched every episode. Being able to like see all that and like put the pieces together and figure out the story, I love.
Yeah, I would tell you this is the career advice I always give to people in this space that are interested in technology, but may not see themselves as a developer, right, or be attracted to that side of things. And it's in that find the space between the tech and the business, right? Like be the person that can help translate the business needs into the technology solution. You don't have to understand at a detailed level how to code it or how to build it, but if you can be that translation layer, that's got so much more value in it than being one or the other, because there are lots of people that can talk about the business and there are lots of people that can be good engineers or build the tech. But if you can be the bridge in between and really help provide insight there, that's way more powerful and can be way more valuable. So
I
that
agree.
certainly resonates. All right, let's ask some local questions to wrap things up. If you could have dinner with any payments leader, past or present, who would it be and why?
I would probably say like I don't have one, but like back in the day, I think when the clearinghouse started, and there was I think a lot of that started I think in London back in the day. I would love to sit with some of those folks who remember they used to all come to the room with their checks and just kind of like figure out the balances and then like trade the money right there. I just think it would be so interesting to sit down and speak with them around kind of what are they doing? Like, how is that experience? And then having that conversation about what our experience is now. And I think that would just be a cool conversation.
You would just blow their minds. They
I might, although they might go, you guys haven't solved that yet? I'm like, no, no, we haven't. We're still writing checks. Yes, we are.
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. They would be surprised that those still exist. We thought that would die out after a decade or so. We didn't.
Exactly. They think we live like the Jetsons, but not so much.
So the next one, you've, as we talked about before, you've been able to live and have experience your career in different parts of the world. Charlotte's a growing fintech hub. We've got a lot of activity here. We've always had a strong financial services background, but I think we've seen increasingly that expand into other types of fintechs and other things as well. What do you think about our kind of payment ecosystem and how it compares to other markets or other regions that you've lived in before?
I think it's a really cool ecosystem here, actually. I think that you've got a lot of folks that understand the end to end pieces of payments in the financial industries, right? A lot of people here have, worked at all of the different financial institutions and really just have deep expertise around how some of this stuff came about, who's doing what in that space, and and where everyone's got an idea of like if I started my own startup, this is what I would focus on. And it's different because if you think about maybe the West Coast, right? Yes, there's some it's all about startup. It's about the tech, I think. It's more about the tech than it is about the actual business of payments. Think about New York, and it's a little bit more of that money management, right? Corporate investment banking focus. And here, I just feel like it's more of our payment people that really understand those pieces. So I think it's really cool. And I think it's also, if you go back to as well, what we talked about, Charlotte, in the beginning, being a very open community. People are really wanting to share their information, right? It's not this like I need to be the smartest person in the room, or I've got to show that I know this. People are really open to discussing it, what they know, what they don't know, and I think that makes it a really cool community.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think that makes me feel really proud of the community to know that that's the impression that you've gotten of it, because I think that's all totally true. And my experience with a lot of the West Coast companies has been that often they're lacking that deep
Yeah.
banking and payments expertise. Great tech, great ideas, great customer experience, but sometimes lacking the like, here's how these bank systems actually work, and here's why this is so complicated, or here's why this, takes the time it takes, or et cetera. So,
or a cool tech solution that we're like, it's cool. No one needs it. Like
exactly.
Don't need it.
It's not solving a problem. Yeah. All right. Last question. What's your favorite thing about Charlotte, or what's something going on in the city that you're really excited about?
So I live right on the border of Uptown and South End. And I love these types of days, like these sunny days, like spring and summer, because people are just out and about. It's a very safe area. I will walk to work and walk home late at night sometimes. But I love the weekends and stuff. Everyone's out. We're running on the rail trail, walking to different places to eat. I get to see on the weekends, there's what is 2 weekends ago, it was crazy downtown where it's like there was the basketball games, there was a parade, and there was a football or the soccer games. And it's just the city just kind of is alive on those times. People are walking everywhere and you can just feel it. And I really love that. And the city's small enough as well where it's not so spread out to where you can still feel that. And we'll forget because we live so close to it. We'll see all these people walking some days and we're like, what is it this weekend? Right? What's going on? And again, a mom of 2 smaller kids, it's very family friendly. Right? So I can take them everywhere with us and they can also enjoy it as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Kelly, thank you so much. It's been a really awesome conversation. Really enjoyed getting to know you more and just hearing all your background. I'm sure everybody's going to enjoy hearing it as well. Just thank you. Thank you for being here.
No, thanks for having me. I really had a good time, and I'm looking forward to doing more with the organization and being a bigger part of the community.
Awesome. Well, we thank you for that. And we thank everybody that's been listening today. This is the PayCLT Payments Hub podcast, and we will see you next time.